Good morning, dear colleagues from all over Europe. It's our pleasure to welcome you once again in another edition of the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar, organized by the European Commission and the EWP Plus Consortium. It's a great pleasure seeing that there is so great interest in this webinar. And today, of course, we have once again a very great agenda to present you and many new issues to let you know about. So my name is Nikos Glorios. I'm an Erasmus officer from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and I will be the moderator today of this webinar. Before we start, just some ground rules for all you to know. First of all, this is a webinar format, so unfortunately, we cannot give you the floor to put your questions down. But on the other hand, there is a very useful functionality, the Q&A button on the bottom of your screens, where you can put your questions. The questions should be short, preferably. And also, you know that you can upvote questions. So please do read them before you put your question in there. Also, I would like to ask you, as I mentioned, to be the questions to be short, and we will have in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar where we are going to reply hopefully, most of them. So today's agenda has to do about policy updates, about 2024 priorities, the functionality of the new interinstitutional agreement, new support material, the implementation of learning agreements, and the use of the Erasmus Plus app. So I think it's very interesting. And so we have a great panel that will introduce and will update you all about these issues. So first of all, we have the colleagues from the European Commission and the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. So Alexandra Licht is with us. Also Harpa Sif Arnastodir, also. Alexandra is a policy officer and Harpa is an EWP relationship manager. Also, we have Victor Aguilar Mentes, also a policy officer from the same Directorate General. Good morning to all three of you. Also, we have Daika Kuzmane from the European University Foundation, who is an EWP Plus manager. Tibor Toth, EWP Plus, also part of the EWP team. Paul Leys from the University of Ghent, an EWP Plus task lead for outreach and communication. Tibor Toth, I mentioned Tibor, I think, so also he's here with us. Yannicka Haliasme from the University of Tartu, Erasmus Program Coordinator and an EWP champion, the University of Tartu. Hi, Yannicka, as well. Also, we have the pleasure to have colleagues from the entity data who are part of the consortium about the Erasmus student card. So it's with us Yasmina Castro. She's part of the management team of the European student card. And Jeroen van Lent, also a member of the Erasmus student card team and task lead for IT developments. So thank you very much, all of you being here, and also our participants. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Alexandra for the introduction and the policy updates. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here. I see we have almost 800 participants, which is excellent. And this is wonderful because I think we will have a lot to update, a lot to inform, and also to hear from your questions and suggestions. So without further ado, if we can have the slides. Thank you. Great. So we had a very busy year last year, and we will have a very busy year this year. And we wanted to share the policy priorities set by the Commission, of course, after a long consultation and discussions with the consortium, with institutions, with various meetings we had in the EIE, with the various institutions that relationship managers had. And we had a very good outreach that helped us actually to understand what is the situation in institutions, that helps us now to define the priorities for 2024. So these priorities are not detached from what you experience within your institution, from the feedback we received from the relationship managers that are in a constant contact with the international officers and with the developers. So the priorities for 2024 continue the outreach and support targeting institutions not yet using EWP. Here, our top priority, and you see it's on top of the list, is to ensure that all institutions which are not yet using EWP, they might be connected but not really exchanging in EWP, will start to exchange. And for that, we have a team that will reach out to the institutions, we'll have more webinars, we'll have guides and support materials, which my colleagues will further explain during the webinar. A second priority is to have targeted EWP events in the various member states to boost digitalization and to provide an opportunity for peer learning, because webinars are wonderful, support materials are wonderful, but sometimes the best way to learn is to see how your colleagues from neighboring HIs are actually implementing EWP and how they deal with similar problems. We want to another priority target will be to have the improved version of the IAs, which will be in place very, very soon, to have it available and used by all users by the end of the year. To have continuous stakeholder consultation to improve also the way LAs and the fact sheets are exchanged. And of course, to have a complete migration of the Ask Tutor to the EC Cloud, what it means that all the data will be secure, more safe, and the flows will be more, how can I say, more smooth. And our colleagues from Entity Data will further elaborate on this point. So if we go to the next slide, we will see that concretely on EWP, our targets are to have all HIs with the access to improved IA version by summer 2024. So as I just mentioned, there is an improved version of IAs which will enable you to some exciting features that were actually requested by the users, and will further see what are these features, what they are. So have all the users with access to this improved IAA by the summer, or more realistically towards the autumn 2024. And we also highly appreciate and would be very we will provide all the support that is needed to achieve a 95% of all learning agreements for academic year 24-25 completed via EWP. So currently we have already a very high attainment. Over 50% of the learning agreements are exchanged on EWP, and in some countries we talk about 60 or even 70%. In some countries we talk about, of course, less attainment, but the goal is to have the utmost majority of learning agreement exchange via the network. And of course, for that, we will have a focus on national context and peer learning to help you to achieve this goal, to help you to achieve this target. So support material, peer learning activities by the champions in order to achieve these very ambitious yet realistic targets. So the newsletter. For the newsletter, we just wanted to inform you that we have an integration of EWP newsletter and the Ask letter. So we will have one joint Ask newsletter, as we sometimes, as you probably receive the EWP newsletter, the Ask newsletter, but now it's one newsletter. So you would actually see that there is a bit of a change of format. This doesn't require anything from your side, but just to flag that you'll see some difference in the format. It will be nicer and more user-friendly format. And of course, we we invite you to subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't done it. And if you already signed to the EWP newsletter, you don't need to do anything. You will just be migrated to this new and combined newsletter. So this is just to flag for your attention. And of course, to subscribe, you can really scan the following QR code. And this way you assure that you will receive the news in a timely manner. And in the upcoming newsletter, we have many, many exciting features and support materials. So yes, and I will pass the floor to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, about these policy updates. So yes, we can, I think, move on directly to Paul and the functionality of the new interstitial agreements. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Nikos, and thanks also, Alex, for this introduction and for mentioning the IIA or Interinstitutional Agreement update, which have been worked on already for a long time. I think we already informed the IRO community that this update was coming, and now is the time. So teams are testing. Many universities and providers already had successfully tested this functionality, and the decision has been made that this will be rolled out from the start of April onwards. So then we will go from one version. Now I'm becoming a little bit technical. It doesn't matter for you. What matters for you is that new functionalities will become available. And you can go to the next slide, please. But maybe first a little bit of additional context on this update. Where did it came from? So the interinstitutional agreements are already in the EWP network for quite a while. But there were mandatory business requirements based on input from the user community. And the user community, when they had the functionality for IIAs available via EWP, still some functions were missing. For example, something that we are, if you work at IRO with agreements, many of you are familiar with the fact that for a given academic year, we might accept additional students. But then we need, of course, to kind of modify the agreement in order to also make sure it's in our system. So this was one of the elements, part of the mandatory business requirements. Also, there was a user input via the official governance system from the EWP side of things. At the moment where we are today, there's still ongoing technical testing to make sure the operation goes as smooth as possible. And in February, there were technical workshops where the developers community came together, partly on testing, but also on finding the last details that were unclear for them, which makes it hopefully for a smooth migration to the new environment. On the next slide, you will see the functionalities. I was already referring to the possibility to modify approved agreements. From the program rules side of things, there's also, we need to have the possibility to terminate an approved agreement. For example, most oftenly we do approve agreements for the duration of the program, but in some cases you might want to terminate an agreement after a few academic years, maybe because there's no activities or there are other issues in the cooperation. So this functionality is needed and added and made available to the users at the moment. I think another important new functionality will be to delete draft agreements. At the moment, this is not possible. It might be possible in your local implementation. This is also true for the modification and termination. But up until now, there was no common agreement on how to deal with deletions, modifications, and terminations. Which means that even if you had it available in your own system, there was no protocol to kind of pass on this information to your partner. And of course, if you modify an agreement, it should be dealt with at both sides of the cooperation. So deleting draft agreements, I can imagine that in many systems, there's a lot of agreements that never gets approved, or maybe new agreements are approved and you still have the old ones. So this functionality will allow to kind of clean up your databases. Another element is the alignment with the updated template. There was a new template or an updated template launched last spring, and this was not 100% aligned with the technical EWP exchanges, and the new version of IIAs does also cater for that. And you can go to the next slide. Now, what happens with agreements already shared via EWP? There will be no impact on mutually approved agreements. So it's very clear that this work that you've put into getting agreements approved, it remains stable. There's no impact whatsoever, even if it does not align with the newest data standards. An example is that we now, in the new version of the IIA, we need to use 4-digit ISCED codes. If you have approved agreements with 3 or 2-digit ISCED codes, this remains the same. If you initiated an agreement and you're already exchanging with your partner, but the agreement was not yet approved, here you might need to update the agreement, although this will only be the case if the agreement is not aligned with the newest standard. And the newest standard, like I said, the 4-digit ISCED, it's also required to have language requirements for student mobility for studies and staff mobility for teaching. So if that is not part of the IIA yet, you will need to add it before you will be able to approve the agreement. But I would say that possibly this impact is also minor, because it's just tweaking a little bit the agreement, and then you will be able to also approve it under the new version. Next slide, please. Now, as Alex already said, not all institutions will be ready by the 1st of April, which means that some institutions will temporarily be not able to exchange interinstitutional agreements until they also migrate their software to the newest version of the IIAs. Now, there's no discussion that the approved agreements remain valid. So even if your partner is temporarily not available to exchange IIAs, what you approved under the previous version of IIAs, those approved agreements remain valid for student mobility. So no need to worry there. The partner or the system can also upgrade in a later phase. It was mentioned by Alex that the aim is to have it by summer, or more realistically towards the end of the year. Of course, it's up to the nodes to do it as smooth as possible after successful testing. And then also very important, this should not compromise mobilities. So if the institution is not ready to move to the new version and is not able to approve agreements for the call of mobilities for, I think that it's already 2025, 2026, the email confirmation and PDF agreements remain valid to support mobilities. I think this is very important for all of us. You might be part of an institution that won't be ready with this update, but of course it can also happen that your partner is not ready. So even if you are ready, it's still important to understand that there are institutions that won't be ready by the 1st of April, but there is no impact, as it were, on the mobilities, because you still have approved agreements, or you have confirmations to make sure that mobilities can take place. And I think this is it about the functionalities for the new institutional agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, about the updates. I think it's very interesting, and I already see some questions in the Q&A chat box. Still, I would like to remind you that we pose questions, not comments, so as to be able to answer them later, and please keep it as short as possible. So now we're going to the next agenda point in this webinar, And so I'm going to give the floor to Harpa about the new support material. Harpa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos, and hello, everyone. Indeed, we've been working on some new support materials based on, well, the numerous meetings that we've had with many of you in the past year, but also in the EWP town halls and in EWP webinars. So if you go to the next slide, just to summarize a little bit, in the town hall, I think the last town hall that we had, we did have the first colleague who took the floor in the town hall said that they were a newcomer to Erasmus+, to an IRO, and to EWP. And they said, well, basically, I'm lost. Where do I start to get an overview of this process and what I need to do? And then when we were also preparing the comprehensive user guides that were published last year, both on the learning agreement process flow and the data standards and the scenarios, and the same that which we did for the IIAs, we did the comprehensive consultation, which around 500 universities contributed to. And when we were going through your feedback, we could see that there were still a lot of misunderstandings and a lack of clarity about certain aspects of EWP. And then we have, of course, created a lot of guides now to try to clarify different things. But in the meetings that we had with universities, we got this sentence that we quote there on the slide, that the information is everywhere and kind of nowhere at the same time. So when we were reflecting on this feedback, we realized that probably what we were missing was a very short, user-friendly onboarding guide, where you would be able to just get a bird's eye view of the most important information that you need to have as a newcomer to the program and to EWP, with all of the relevant links and all of the resources put in one document, so at your fingertips, so that you can be assured, if you are familiar with what is described in this onboarding guide, if you are aware of the resources that are listed in this onboarding guide, that's it. That's what you need to know. There's nothing that is out there somewhere that you are missing. So you should be on the right page, on the right track. Now, if you go to the next slide, where do you find the guide? Well, we really, really wanted to have it published and ready for you to share today. Unfortunately, we still need to do a little bit of a fine tuning to make it absolutely perfect for you. But just to let you know, we will publish it on the ESCI portal, and we will put the link in the next ESCI newsletter. So if you haven't signed up yet to the newsletter, this is your second out of, I think, 5 reminders for this webinar to really sign up to the newsletter. But also we will share this guide with your digital officer in your Erasmus Plus national agency and ask them also to share it with all institutions in their country. So you won't be able to see the guide today, but very soon. In the meantime, we wanted to present this new resource to you and explain a little bit the logic behind it and how you can use it. Now, if you go to the next slide, I want to give you a brief overview of what this onboarding guide contains. I said, of course, that it was a resource for a newcomer, and that is indeed our primary target audience. But for many of you, you're very much familiar with Erasmus Plus and EWP, and many of you have been working in this program for years, if not decades. So maybe this onboarding guide is not going to be very informative for you. But what we also heard in many meetings is that even if you are an expert, it is very challenging to onboard new colleagues and also to facilitate discussions within your institution. You may need to quickly explain EWP to your rector or to your IT colleague. And if you direct them to the website, it might seem a bit overwhelming. So this leaflet could also work as a conversation starter within your institution. So what it contains is basically a first section, which just says, what is EWP in a one-pager? And the goal here is to put EWP in a broader context. On the one hand, where does EWP fit within the overall Erasmus Plus program management? So what is the BM and what does it do? What is the EWP and what does it do? But then also to put EWP in context of the student mobility workflow. So within the traditional workflow that you do, which is outside of the BM, what does EWP do now? What will EWP do in the near future? And what are the processes that are part of this overall process, but exist at the institutional level? And then from there, we had a little bit of a speak the EWP language. So this would be just a brief overview of the key vocabulary that is used in the context of EWP. And then from there, we explain what does EWP do? And how do I get my institution into EWP? So here we wanted to answer some of the key questions that we've come across. The first one, which we actually got at the last webinar, if I'm not mistaken, a colleague asked, how do I know if my institution is part of EWP? And it's a very understandable question. If you're newly recruited or you've newly been given the responsibility to manage Erasmus+, how do you go about double checking what is the state of play in your institution? So we've put into this guide all of the key links and instructions on looking up if your institution is connected, how to go about issuing the European Student Identifier, so that you know, okay, you can very quickly understand what is the state of play in your institution. But then also beyond that, and this is where this resource can be useful also for colleagues that have been working on the program for a longer time. Let's say you're one of the institutions that, for example, uses the dashboard today, and you're thinking, maybe this is not working well for me, maybe we need a better solution. Maybe we need to invest in an in-house solution, or maybe we should switch to a third-party provider. This guide can give you also the links to the key information that you need to reflect on this. Where's the key information that you need to give your IT colleagues to consider connecting your in-house system to EWP? But if you want to look into using a third-party provider, where can I find data on the performance of this third-party provider? Where can I find information if this third-party provider has tested with the network and has passed the latest protocols? This will become very relevant for you, for example, in version 7. You will want to know if your system is tested and ready, or if another system is tested and ready or not. And then on top of this basic, where do I map and find out about my institution, we also put like a roadmap depending on where you're starting from. So, excuse me, you might be a university, you might discover, actually, my university is not connected. Okay, what are the steps that you should take to get connected? Or you might discover my institution is connected, but we're not exchanging. We haven't exchanged any data yet. Okay, what are the steps that you should take to start exchanging the data? Or you might discover my institution is connected, exchanging data, but we're not issuing the European Student Identifier. What do I do to make that happen? And then finally, beyond these more practical information, we also include there a very simple overview of how decisions are made around EWP, because as you should all know now, we don't take these decisions in isolation. There is a very vast governance structure where we consult universities and actually every single person listening today, if you want to contribute to these discussions and to how things should be improved for the future, there is a way for you to get involved. But we also include their links. For example, if your IT colleagues are struggling, where's the forum for them to get information? Or, what are the digital officers in Erasmus Plus agencies? How do I get in touch with them? And then finally, we have an overview of where you can look for help. I think almost in every single meeting I have had in the past year, colleagues will not be aware of some resource. They might not be aware of the newsletter. They might not be aware of the service desk. They might not be aware of the YouTube channel. They might not be aware of the champions. So here in this onboarding guide, there's a comprehensive overview of all of the resources that you need to. And if you go to the next slide. Yes. So this was just a very quick snapshot into what you can do within the EWP stats portal. I'm not going to go into the details because we have other more important things to focus on in this webinar. But just to let you know, for example, in the onboarding guide, you will find the link to a guide on how you use the stats portal. So that's one of these information resources that colleagues might not be aware of, but we put it in the onboarding guide. And if you go to the next slide. European Student Identifier. This is another thing that is very unclear to colleagues. What is the purpose? How do I issue it? Et cetera, et cetera. So we put into the guide a very short description of what the Student Identifier does. We also put links to success stories from other universities where actually they explain better than I ever could. How did they go about issuing the SC in their institution step by step. But I think I'm not going to go into the details here. You will see this in the onboarding guide. If you go to the next slide. Yes, and this is also just a quick overview, and you will see this in the onboarding guide, of course, as well. But an overview of all of the resources that you have with the hyperlinks, so that if you give this to a colleague and they're looking at something, they can immediately find all of the resources in one place. Unfortunately, the ESCI newsletter link is not there at the moment, but we will add this, of course, now as the new newsletter becomes available in the very near future. And I think this was my final slide. Nope, one more. In terms of the EWP user groups, just to remind one more time that we have the EWP user groups. It's a great place for you to connect with other users of other systems, ask them questions, how they've dealt with different things. But of course, there we also organize a lot of consultations, and we monitor this channel very closely. So actually, a lot of the inspiration of what we've put in the onboarding guide just came from a random post from a colleague that had thought about something and had a question, and we realized, okay, this is not properly documented anywhere. Let's add it to the onboarding guide. So please do consider signing up for the user groups if you haven't already. We actually also plan to put the onboarding guide in the user groups. So once you actually receive it, do take a look, especially those of you that are more experienced with EWP. If you see that we missed something important that definitely should be in the onboarding guide, don't hesitate to give us your feedback there. We will take it into account and we can update it if needed and republish. So just thank you. Thanks again to all of the colleagues that joined today and all of you that I've met with and that have shared ideas and participated in consultations in the past year. It's been incredibly useful and rewarding, and let's continue to have this co-creation and cooperative spirit around EWP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harpa, about the updates on the support material. I think it will be very useful for all colleagues to get their hands on it so very soon. Now, the next presentation is from our colleagues from Entity Data about the European Student Card updates. So for the next 5-6 minutes, we are going to have some updates on the implementation, quick information for our colleagues for this European Student Card. So Yasmin, the floor, and Jeroen, I suppose the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolaus, and thank you everyone for joining today. We're going to give a brief update on the European Student Card. So first, the adoption update, the state of play of the European Student Card, and then Jeroen will walk you through some of the updates regarding the ESC router migration. And we will finish by showing you some exciting new communication materials that we've put together. So first, for the ESC adoption update, here, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Here, there's currently 2.35 million students with an active card. We consider an active card when it has been registered to the ESC router and it has both the hologram and the QR code. Active European student cards are currently being issued in 16 countries, and there are 790 card issuers registered to the ESCR. From those, 264 are issuing active cards, so both with the hologram and the QR code. Our goal is to have more card issuers registered to the ESCR, and for those card issuers registered to the router to begin issuing more active cards. And there are also 5.31 million holograms requested, and you might be asking yourself why there's more holograms requested than the total number of cards. And this is because there can be European student cards with just the hologram, as well as some card issuers request holograms for future cards that have not been issued yet. Okay, so for the next slide, the next slides on the update, I give the floor to Jeroen.
Yes, we'll try to be quick and give you some updates on the European Student Card router. As already sort of announced in the beginning, we're working on the final stages of the migration of the European Student Card router. And the goal for us is to move this to the European Commission Cloud as soon as possible. So I wanted to provide you with a couple of small updates on what we've been working on. This new router will feature a completely redesigned and scalable data model based on other EU standards. As you can see in the picture there, we have designed a new user interface so that this will look and feel like any other EU tool. The software components underneath are all developed, of course, and I think the most important thing here is that we are deploying this to the DigiDigit cloud, the European Commission cloud. Now, there's a couple of behind the scenes on what's going on here, because we have been sharing similar updates for quite some time. There's quite some documents that we had to prepare in order to get this ready. So there's a project charter, IT security plan, and other documents that were prerequisites to this launch. We have gained access to the European Commission hosting, which also took its time. Of course, as you can imagine, these are complicated processes. We're currently finalizing the role of all involved parties, so making sure understanding what the role of card issuers, the European Commission, and us as contractor are. And once this is concluded, we finalize the data protection impact assessment and a couple of other legal documents. All in all, this will then lead to us knowing a final launch date, which we will, of course, communicate with you very soon as we know this. Could we move to the next slide? Yes. In terms of the migration, I know many of you will be wondering what this means. Do we have to migrate data? There's 2.3 million cards out there in circulation. So I want to clarify a little bit that all data will be migrated from the old European Student Card router to the new one. There's no downtime for students that hold cards, and all cards will continue to be validated. This also means that there is no downtime for you or for anyone involved, and everything is ensured to be backwards compatible. So the way you're currently interacting with the European Student Card router in terms of issuing cards, this will remain to be exactly the same, aside from the updated user interface and all the new back office logic and new hosting and so on. It's just important to note that you will have to regenerate the API key if you're using the API for uploading cards. As this is done to improve security, and there will be an updated terms and conditions and processing agreement that you will have to accept with before continuing to issue cards. But we will make sure that for students, all of this continues to work and that there is no downtime whatsoever. Then on the last slide, we'll give a quick overview of some other updates. Unfortunately, the current sandbox environment had to be discontinued in order to facilitate this migration to the European Commission cloud services. This decision was made to ensure that we can maintain everything to the highest levels of integrity and ensure compliance with the technical and security standards that we want to follow. And then in terms of the functionalities that the new router will offer, as I already mentioned, things will very much remain the same. Cards can be managed by the API, but new features that we have now is that they can also be managed through the user interface if we want to easily extend them or issue a new card. There will also be a CSV upload as you're used to, and then the other functionalities to manage students, to validate cards, to generate or regenerate your API keys will remain to be there. There are also screens that you can manage your university colleagues so that you can invite new joiners or if there are changes in the team, and keep this all easy and agile and lean. Now, there are a couple of discontinued features that you need to be aware of as well. There was a DOE info storage of certificates and keys on the European Student Card router that was used in a couple of universities. We are working with this individual university, so if you don't know what this means, this likely doesn't affect you. We're working with the individual universities that have implemented this to ensure that we can continue to support this in a minimal way. But likely this is none of your concern. And lastly, there used to be a redirection of data to third-party services, and this is also discontinued to ensure data protection is on point and as good as we can have it. I think that's it from my side. Back to you, Jasmine.
Thanks, Jeroen. Okay, quickly also just on the communication materials. So on the Commission website, in the part about the European Student Card, there's also a new infographic that is posted. And here it's a communication asset that's available for anyone that explains why the ESCI was launched, the different building blocks of the ESCI, which is Erasmus Without Paper, the Erasmus Plus app, and the European Student Card. It also explains what is the ESC, why is it important, the benefits of the European Student Card, the benefits for higher education institutions, card issuers, students, service providers. It also explains a little bit more about the ESCR, the European Student Card Router, how the card works, key statistics. So I would just encourage everyone to look on the Commission website, where we publish news articles regularly, as well as additional communication assets. And if you have any questions or need further support, you can always contact us through our help desk, and the email is there below. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for the time. Back to you, Nikolaus.
Thank you very much, Yasmin and Jeroen, about these updates about the European Student Card as well. So we are a little bit back on time, so rushing to the next presentation from Paul and Yannicka about the implementation of digital learning agreements. So Paul and Yannicka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos, and very happy to have my colleague Yannicka here as well. Yannicka is working at the University of Tartu, who has been introduced already, and she's an EWP champion. And I will be presenting a little bit implementing digital learning agreements, maybe more from a theoretical perspective, and then Yannicka can complement with some practical experience. So please, you can go to the next slide. Before we get started on this topic, I would like to provide a little bit of context. And Harpa was already referring to the EWP stats portal. At the moment, we see that there are about 200,000 learning agreements shared via EWP for academic year 2023-24. If you heard Alex also referring to the goal of having 95% or, of course, ultimately 100% learning agreements digitally approved via EWP, the target is 250,000 learning agreements, because that's approximately the number of student mobility for students per academic year for mobility as a whole in the Erasmus program. If we then look at the current approval rate, so out of those 200,000 learning agreements, about 50% gets approved. So there's 2 points to improve those numbers. On the one hand, have more learning agreements shared via EWP. On the other hand, also making sure that we can conclude the process. When the learning agreement is shared, that we also get it approved. You can go to the next slide. So how to go about improving both numbers? In autumn, an EWP assessment report was published. And there, one of the findings is that not all target institutions, and target institutions are institutions implementing student mobility for studies, because at the moment, the digital learning agreements only are a part of student mobility for studies. So traineeship agreements are currently not available in a digital manner, at least not via EWP. So not all target institutions are yet connected, but also several institutions are connected, but not yet using EWP. And of course, when they are connected, when we send a learning agreement, and this is not processed on the other side, this is of course a bit of a problem for both the sending IRO or coordinator, as well as for the students, because it's a bit of a confusing situation, I would say. Now, another element that is a bit challenging from the side of the sending institution is that they need to indicate the contact at the receiving institution. Which oftentimes, and I saw some questions in the chat or in the Q&A about this, and I will get back to that later. But oftentimes, this is also a reason that the agreement does not get approved. And then we also see there's duplicate learning agreements. What do I mean with duplicate learning agreements? Several learning agreements for the same student for the same mobility. So this is also something we need to dive a little bit further into in order to improve those rates and to get to the 95% or even 100% of learning agreements exchanged and approved in a digital manner. You can go to the next slide, please. Now, Harpa already referred to the EWP user guide. So those two cases, institutions not yet connected and institutions not yet exchanging. So there are a few steps you can take already today. If you're not yet connected for learning agreements, you might be connected for other processes or not. You might be using an in-house system and not all functionality is available yet. But first and foremost, you need to map the needs of your institution, but also review your internal processes. Because of course, we are all used to the process with PDF from the past. Once we get acquainted to digital learning agreements, we might need, yes, thank you. Well, we need to review how we deal with learning agreements internally, which might imply also faculty, staff, or staff at the central level. Then, if you're not connected yet, you need to decide how to connect to EWP. There are several ways to join the network. You can do it via third-party software. You can do it via the EWP dashboard that is connected to the online learning agreement, OLA, which is a very familiar term in the higher education sector. And it's also important then to determine who is the key EWP contact as well. If you're already connected but not yet exchanging, it's very important to understand, of course, how the system works. You might also need to further optimize your internal processes. And here, of course, the barrier to start exchanging learning agreements might be a little bit higher than interinstitutional agreements because students are involved. It's not just an IRO who needs to be in control now. No, you also need probably faculty staff, but also students. So in that regard, you might want to start with a pilot group in order to see how it functions, how it works, and then later on also expand it to the whole university. And it's always good to flag and address issues encountered, both internally, but also there's the ESCI service desk. The resource will also be shared in the presentations. And then, of course, very important, start exchanging via EWP, because many colleagues are already in the network. Many students are already trying to conclude digital learning agreements. So if we have the whole community exchanging via EWP, this will also make the lives easier for those that are already connected, but be confronted with partners who are not yet connected or not yet exchanging. And on the next slide, we have the link to the comprehensive user guides. The user guides were created really from a practitioner point of view. So it provides an overview of what you need to know when you want to start, or when you're already exchanging the digital learning agreements. There are some general rules included there, also a reference to program rules, some exceptional use cases. So it's, I think, a very important and useful resource for those of you who are dealing with digital learning agreements. So if you did not yet consulted or downloaded the guide, I invite you to scan the QR code and to go to that resource and make sure that that we're all on the same page when it comes to what kind of information is exchanged. What's also part of this user guide is a non-technical description of the fields that are being exchanged via EWP. I think this is also useful to know because you might have additional information in your local implementation to know, like, okay, what is going to the partner and what can I expect to receive when dealing with EWP exchanges for learning agreements. On the next slide, we have a description of the standardized process, which was part of course, the new exchange when learning agreements became digital. Here in the past, I think it was not very clear how the process worked. Learning agreements could be initiated by the receiving institution or by the sending institution. With EWP, this is very clear. Of course, first there's a preparatory phase on the side of the sending institution, but then the student can create a learning agreement. First of all, the sending coordinator will either approve or reject the learning agreement and ask the student to make some corrections. Once the learning agreement is signed by both the student and the sending university, then it goes to the receiving institution that also has the option to approve or reject with comments. And when this process is finalized, we have the LA approved by the 3 parties. At that stage, there is a possibility to modify the learning agreement again, because those of you dealing with learning agreements know that when the student arrives at the host institution, it's quite common that a certain course is not available, or that there are timetable conflicts. So in that case, we need to modify the approved version of the learning agreement, and this approval process starts again. So initiation by student sending hey. Once student and sending hey have approved, it goes to the receiving hey for final approval of a new version of this learning agreement. Now, when talking about processes, you can go to the previous slide, please. When talking about processes, this is of course all in theory, but I would be also interested, Janica, to hear your story on how you did deal with going from a paper world / PDF world towards this digital environment where learning agreements are exchanged via EWP in a digital manner.
Thank you, Paul. To start from the very beginning, I have to mention that first we had this ambitious plan to develop our perfect in-house tool for mobility management, but we did not succeed because it was too complex. So we went to also the dashboard because we wanted to see how this environment is working, what so many partner universities are using. So we have done many phases, for example, a dashboard. Then with the help of our IT department, we started to analyze the business processes. And also we participated every conference and webinar available and discussed with the colleagues to see how they are working and where they are heading. So our IT department supported the idea to go for a mobility management tool that is already available on the market and ready to be connected to EWP, and not to develop our own system. Our national agency brought us to Sweden, and we visited the colleagues. They explained what tools they are using. So we did some testing and discussions, and we chose Solamove. But when we already knew we are going to use this third-party provider, we still wanted to test dashboard first for the learning agreements. And it worked very well for us because we had this experience, and we could easily prepare ourselves for the Solamove. But as you mentioned, it's sometimes it's a good idea to start with smaller groups. We started with incoming learning agreements, as many other universities. Now I wonder, because our incoming is someone else's outgoing student, but still, most of us started with incoming students. And then we also had a small group of outgoing students. We managed their learning agreements via dashboard. And once we started with Solamove, in this system, you need to have the approved application before you can generate the learning agreement. So we also started with a smaller group of outgoing students, only for one active institute with many mobilities. We had their application round in the system, and then those students were able to generate the learning agreements online. And later, the departmental coordinator of this unit helped us to describe the process for the entire university. But we did not push any partners accepting online learning agreements or sending the students with only online learning agreements. Both versions, also PDF, were possible. But when it comes to the business process, we also started to discuss very early whether we should change something in the flow. My biggest worry was that both the interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements were signed on quite high level. cooperation agreements were signed by the deans of the faculties, and we only have four faculties. You can imagine how many agreements the deans had to sign. And also when it comes to learning agreements, the agreements were like advised and processed by the study advisors, but still approved by the heads of the academic units. So it was like two-stage approval. And we figured out very fast when testing all the tools that this two level approval will not be like supported by the tools. And then we opened the discussion in the university whether we could like lower the level of signing those documents. And the legal department gave us green light, so to say. They accepted that we give the authority to sign the learning agreements to the study advisors in the faculty, closest person to the students going for the mobilities and discussing all the courses. So we didn't have to change like the process as such, but the staff members were approving the agreements. And first, I would say it was maybe a different way of doing things for them, but now the faculty members often ask why they cannot find the learning agreement for traineeship or the working plan for outgoing staff members in Solamo. So I would say they are rather happy with having most of the learning agreements in the system. And I also checked the statistics that at least 2/3 of the learning agreements are approved online, and which are on paper versions. They also include the learning agreements for blended mobilities because not all the universities use the same tools for blended mobilities yet.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jannica. I think that's very useful indeed. And an important message here is you need indeed, it's not just switching like on EWP and start using it right away. There goes a little bit of planning and as well involving faculty members, maybe reorganization of approval and roles in the university. But I think it's a very good example of how you come from a paper world into a digital one, and happy to hear that the coordinators even want to go further with EWP and also considering other processes to become digital. You can go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit more general. So of course, the learning agreement is and will remain the basis for automatic recognition. The learning agreement needs to be approved by 3 parties before the start of the mobility. I think that's one of the reasons that sometimes, even if we initiate something digital, we revert to a PDF version because we still want to have it approved before the start of the mobility. I already mentioned that once the learning agreement is approved, changes to the study program or other information is still possible. And with EWP, several approved versions of the learning agreement are supported. I would also like to highlight that whenever you encounter a technical issue, it is very important to get in touch with the ESCI service desk. The presentation will be shared later on the ESCI portal, the European Student Initiative portal from the European Commission. And you can there directly find a link to contact the service desk because they analyze issues and also keep track of structural problems in the network. And it's very important whenever there is an issue that it's also tracked and that we can solve the issue and also maybe the underlying problems. And in case of a technical issue, I think PDF is always a good plan B. You can go to the next slide. Now, I think it's very important to understand what are reasons to change correct the learning agreement. So new versions will come whenever the content of the learning agreement changes. I refer to tables A, B, C, D, E. This is for those who are very familiar with the learning agreements. There are several tables for long-term mobility, for short-term blended mobility. Jannika was already referring to that you can use EWP for short-term blended mobility in the context of BIPs, for example. So whenever the content of the learning agreement changes, there's a new version. Whenever some personal data changes, this should also lead to a new version. This also means that many other, and you can go to the next slide, many other changes to the learning agreement do not necessarily mean that there will be a new version of the learning agreement. Next slide, please. And amongst others, administrative contacts. This was also part of some of the questions in the Q&A. Administrative contacts are in se not a reason to reject a learning agreement. So whenever a wrong contact is indicated, it is still possible to approve the learning agreement. You can just allocate it to the right person on the side of the receiving institution, and then get the learning agreement approved. But this is not a reason to reject the learning agreement. From the other hand, many institutions rely on the administrative contact to allocate the learning agreement to the right faculty of department. So in some cases, it depends a little bit on the process, it is needed to make sure that the learning agreement gets approved. In case the learning agreement is rejected or the contact person is not the right one, previous slide, please. You can still email the partner can change the contact and then provide an updated version of the learning agreement. Another reason that learning agreements get rejected quite often is the mobility duration, because the dates are not 100% correct. However, this is also not a reason to reject the learning agreement. The mobility duration is just indicative. If need be, it can be corrected in a later stage. Just to make clear for you when approximately the student will be exchanged. And of course, once other processes such as nominations and maybe even confirmations of arrival come into focus, this will be the place where we can correct those data. But on the learning agreement, it's just indicative. Also important to understand, it's important to only have one learning agreement per student per mobility. And it's best practice to use the 4-digit ISGET codes from the beneficiary module. Now, I would also like to hear, Jannika, your experience when it comes to the learning agreements approval rates. That you came across many learning agreements that get rejected because of the mobility duration, because of administrative contacts, and how do you deal with it? Also, both from the incoming and from the outgoing side.
With the outgoing students, we actually trust our students to initiate the agreements. That also includes finding the right contact person for their learning agreement. So we do not do that for our students. We do not give them the contact persons they have to indicate on the learning agreements. Since not many learning agreements are rejected for those reasons, I think we do something right. So our students are advised to make sure they know who is the right contact person for their learning agreement. If they do not manage, then the faculty coordinators can help them also. And for them, the previous learning agreements already in the system is like a good database to see who was the contact person confirming the learning agreement for the same university and for the same study field previously. So I have to say there are not so many learning agreements rejected for those reasons. When it comes to incoming students, we do not reject the learning agreements because of the wrong contact details, because in the system, the faculty members who are actually in charge of processing those learning agreements can easily filter the learning agreements. The applications are in the same system. They already know whose learning agreement they need to process and approve. And if they approve, their contact details will be available. So it's still possible for them to approve it. So this is not an issue. And when it comes to dates, we only advise the incoming students to change the study period if it's like if it's not according to our academic calendar, not for like few days or weeks. And then it's because we want them to have like correct dates to plan their trip, not because we don't want to like confirm with the wrong dates. So sometimes for the dates we have to, because then the students will be like advised correctly, but not because of the contact persons.
Okay, thanks a lot, Janika, for your practical experience once again. On the final slide, I just want to clarify that we, like discussed earlier, there will be an update on the interinstitutional agreements coming towards the end of this month. There's also preparatory work ongoing on a potential learning agreement update. And here I think it's very important that we also hear your voice on what works well with the current implementation and what can be improved. So a consultation via the user groups will follow. And we would really invite you to join the user groups and to join the discussions on this consultation, because the input from the user community on how this kind of processes and how this digital learning agreement exchange can be improved is vital in order to make it as useful as possible for the community of users. And back to you, Nikos.
Thank you very much, Paul and Janika, about the presentation. Going to the next and final topic of this webinar about the Erasmus Plus app. First of all, I want to welcome, I didn't mention him at the beginning, Peter Töberling from the ELTE University, Eötvös-Loránd University in Hungary, and also a member of the EWP Plus consortium about the Erasmus Plus app. Peter, welcome. So he's going to present you for the next 15 minutes some new features and updates about the Erasmus Plus app. And then we are going to go straight to the questions and answers Q&A. So please stay with us for replying the most upvoted questions. Please keep putting your questions there. And Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And welcome everyone. So for the Erasmus Plus application, please for the next slide. After some break, we had 2 new releases in the last 4 months, and these updates are now providing a new and updated user experience. That was our main focus in these releases, which is mostly based on user feedback, to improve the general usability, to improve the look and feel, and also to provide some new features that students would find useful and missed previously. If you could please, well, thank you. I will try to speed it up a little bit to just leave some space for questions. So what I'm going to talk about is that for the main improvements, we have a new onboarding and login screens, which was important to actually have students and help users to get on board and understand what they are looking at. We have a new global search and some filtering options, a destination finder and application process that is integrated with the dashboard, a user-controlled mobility journey, accommodation finder, and generally an overall better and cleaner UI. I will talk about these in the next slides. So for the general login and user experience, we had some feedbacks regarding that sometimes the interface was the first look was overwhelming for students. And that's why we tried to streamline a little bit and created some new onboarding screens and an accordion page that's basically a collapsible information page that helps students and users understand what they are looking at, what the application offers as options and features, and what are the main features that help them to understand, for one side, the interface that they are looking for and the features that they will be able to find in the application. Also, we had a rather complicated login screen, which we try to streamline and provide more information to it. There are some technical limitations because we are relying on external services like My Academic ID and EU login, but now it's more clear for the users that what they are looking for and why they are jumping outside from the system, even if for a brief screens. Could you please? Thank you. There were some feedbacks that there is a lot of information in different sections in the application. And if a user goes through a mobility journey, they will find a lot of information. But there is also the feed, the user feed that provides a different layer of information. And for a user to find everything based on a simple phrase or a common search, that was not possible previously. Now, one of the main features is that we created a global search function that gathers and collects information throughout the whole application from all the sections. And it was given a separate page. Also, we added some new filters, including the city filter and the tech filters that helps further and fine-tune their filtering and search, so they can find information easier. And this is also for information sharing and feeding. The city field is now there. There is a separate My Content page that's basically for those sharing messages and feeds, which is basically a one-stop page that they can filter all their own messages and check them easier. Next page, please. For the integrated mobility application, we have improved the screens. This function works with the dashboard, basically. What we did was basically reorganize the screens somewhat to have some better have some more information for the destination screens, provide an easier look and better selection of what they can, where they can apply and how, have a cleaner interface. And also some more important new features are that now they can be saved as drafts. Previously this wasn't possible. Now if they want to, they can stop in the middle of the application and they can save their application in the draft mode to continue later. And also they are able to preview the documents they have uploaded. Next, please. So, like I mentioned, we renewed basically the interface to make it more useful, rearranged some of the icons, the menus, and made it more visible, cleaner, rearranged the tabs. So it's more logical for the users based on the feedback that we have received. I wouldn't go into details to that one. The Erasmus Plus application, by the way, the new releases are now live, so you can check it yourself. For one of the main changes that we did regarding the interface, and not only the interface, was that whenever a student goes on a mobility, how we arrange the logic, the basic logic of the application is that they go through the mobility journey steps and different phases. We had an automatic control to check how they advance, but they really required more information, what is optional, what is mandatory, and to be able to track their progress. So we converted the mobility journey to have these tags that you can see on this screenshot, which is mandatory, which is just recommended or just optional. And also now it's a manual checklist, which is absolutely controlled by the user, so they can check how they want to progress. Next, please. Thank you. One of the major features and new features that are offered in the application now is the accommodation finder, which is an integrated module with the home of the Mobile Europeans project. And it now offers a different accommodation and housing offers, and that the users can access through the application. That means that there is a separate page for that, where they can start looking for an accommodation on the city using different filters. And as you can see, there are some basic information provided for each of these offers and some basic screenshots. And they can filter down on based on their needs. We don't allow contracting through the application, but if someone is interested in one of the offers, they can just click on the offer and are brought to the partner, and they can check it there. What is important, so just one step back, is that it's not visible at this screen, but there are also quality labels that we apply. So just if a user needs to, if they have some special needs, then they can also filter down to those. Okay, and we have updated, in parallel, we have updated the FAQ entries. That means that the documentation that you can find in the Erasmus Plus application now, it contains more information, some extended information on the previous features and on the new features as well. Also, we have added a separate page with new useful links, which is really the links that was found as generally useful and needed for students to just find their way and understand the program or any project related to this application. But the knowledge base, we have a knowledge base. If you go to the useful links page, you can also find the link to the knowledge base that provides more information that is focusing on the actual higher educational institutions, so how they can connect, how they can share information with the application. But there will be some short video tutorials that will be shared there as well. Which was also something that was needed to help students how to start making use of the basic features and how to understand the interface. So these are all related, and the video tutorials and knowledge base updates are in progress. Some of them is already accessible, and some will be accessible in the following weeks. And with that, I ran through the presentation, so I planned a little bit longer, but since we are running out of time, I will leave this for the question and answers.
Thank you very much, Peter, also for facilitating a little bit the Q&A section. So before going to the questions and answers, we first of all want to ask you to join the next event, our next event, the town hall meeting that will take place on the 16th of April, the same time. So there will be also a registration link to join us. The format there is a little bit different. You can raise your hand, you can discuss with all EWP Plus Consortium colleagues about any issues you might face. So it's a more interactive session and meeting. Please join. It's great always to hear from you. About the problems that you face, because as you see, there is a great group of people supporting all this initiative, the European Student Card Initiative. Also, do not forget to participate in the EWP Plus user groups. You can see here the QR code about that, so scan it and you can join. And also do not forget to subscribe to the EWP newsletter. Also, you will get in your inbox all latest updates about what's happening in the EWP ecosystem. So I think we can now go directly to the most upvoted questions we have. So the first one, probably we go to the colleagues. The first one, so it's some questions about the future and about different actions, how it can be digitalized. So we have a question from Audrey about the training agreements, the staff teaching and training agreements, where it would be online. Also, I would probably sum up all these features and also about the KAA 171 agreements, international, Erasmus Plus international agreements, and the BEEPs. I think there are all these questions being part of the same answer probably. So I will give the floor to Alex to reply to them.
Thank you. So I will start with BEEPs. So currently the LA already caters to a short-term mobility, so it caters already for BEEPs. As we mentioned earlier, the focus for 2024 is IAAs and LAs. So we're focusing on these two processes. The next processes, without a concrete timeline, so without a strong timeline or obligation to exchange digitally, are nominations and transcript of record, which are now, as you might know, are still is the early release phase. In relation to multilateral IAAs and LAs, international IAAs and LAs, there we're looking at a later stage, of which we do not have a concrete timeline in place. As I mentioned, we're taking small steps, so focusing at several processes at a time, and currently it's LAs and IAAs. And so for now, there is no timeline when these processes will be in place for training and stuff as well. But however, it's definitely on the agenda. But as mentioned, we're focusing on fully stabilizing and making the current processes available for everyone and optimized for everyone. This is why our colleagues presented the various features that will be with the new IA release, and also the same for the LA release. So I hope this answers to your question. And I think I have another question to answer, right?
Yes, I think one of the avoided questions is about accessibility of the tools, the digitalization tools of Erasmus Plus program. So the floor is yours again.
So in terms of accessibility, just to mention, the onboarding guide was not published because the unit that is responsible, our communication unit, did not approve that it is accessible for all viewers, so for people with special needs. So just to mention that DGAC is taking a look that all the tools are accessible. But of course, as you understand, the onboarding guide, it's a document that should be reviewed, and it's rather a simple way forward to make it accessible. However, IT tools such as the BM and EWP, this is it's more complex and not as straightforward as editing a document. So to your question, thank you for bringing our attention again to this issue. It is important. It is work in progress. So please be patient. As for the OLS, as you know, the OLS is not mandatory, and there were a lot of changes going with the OLS, moving to EU Academy and so on. So this is also work in progress. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you that, yes, everything is ready and fully accessible, but it is a work in progress. And the feedback is taken and will be passed.
Thank you, Alex, for the answer. And thanks, of course, Lucas, for the question. So going to the next upvoted question, which is from Christina Varvello, and it's about the responsible persons of incoming students' learning agreements approval of the hosting university. It's more of a comment, probably, not a question per se, but Paul probably can provide some context on that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Nikos. This is part of what the ongoing work of the evaluation of the current learning agreement functionalities and system. So what is very important once again is that colleagues join the user group consultation and indeed share their opinion and their concerns about the sending university that needs to indicate contacts at the receiving end, but also other issues. So this can be taken into account for an update of the learning agreements. It has been already discussed at the BPO-SEC governance meeting, Business Process Owner Forum, and this was indeed one of the issues that were raised. It's already also in the consultation from relationship managers with institutions. This keeps coming up. So important to get as many opinions as possible, because other institutions rely on this data point for their internal processes when allocating incoming learning agreements. So here, very important to get the colleagues taking part in the consultation. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Paul, answering Christina's question. Now, I see that the next question is about the Erasmus Plus app. Probably also I see that there are some questions about the accommodation and about the functionality. So first of all, probably we should go to the accessibility of the Erasmus Plus app for students. I see here, for example, Andre and Monica also asking this question. So whether there'll be some updates on that or improvements or any points on that regard. So probably Peter, I think you are the best person to answer.
Yep. For the usability of the application, currently most of the features, let me emphasize that most of the features is already available even without actually having dashboard. So basically what you need dashboard is the application process and also to share information with the application. Even if you are using a third-party provider, you can have an instance of the dashboard that you can use to feed information in the app. So that's also a possibility right now. To integrate with all the third-party providers, that's a different story. And currently, I don't have the look on how we can progress with that or what development projects will make that available currently. So that's still up.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, a lot for providing context on these questions. Let's go to yeah, I think this one from 16 has been already discussed as well. Also about, I think that we will remain at the accommodation at the app side, the Erasmus Plus app side. So there are some questions about the accommodation. So whether there are any other companies that have access to the app and whether there are certain measures to, avoid scamming and financial exploitation. To be honest, this is an issue that students searching for accommodation usually face. These scams and these problems with accommodation. So probably, Peter, I don't know if you have also an answer for these two questions.
From the application side, we basically have a module that interfaces the offers that we have. So we don't, that was part of the reason why we didn't implement any contracting part to avoid any scams in the application. So what we do is showcasing and presenting the offers in a filterable and easy way. But the home project that I was referring to that we have an integrated module with, they take care about controlling and filtering the potential providers. So I would suggest to please check the homeproject.eu page. That's their homepage, and there is a separate section for the onboarding. They provide the quality control over the providers.
Great, thanks, Peter, once again for the answers. So there is a way to safeguard. There's a whole project running through these accommodation options. I think we can go on and have the questions about the Erasmus student card, especially. And I also see that there is a question from Andre about when will the Erasmus student card will move to some usable technology. QR code and hologram are just pictures with no usage in the real world. And this is the quote from Andre. So I think Jeroen probably can take up this question.
Yes, I will be happy to answer this in person as well. I wrote you already a little reply in the Q&A answer as well. We are constantly working on sort of expanding the ways of validating student status, so also things beyond the QR code and the hologram. However, it is important to note that with the vast, landscape of different card technologies out there, different brands, different ways of using student cards, the QR code and the hologram that are added on top of all of that are still the easiest ways to roll out European student cards. And it is important for us to keep that low entry barrier to join the initiative. So these will stick around, but we continue to work towards having other ways as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeroen. And I think I also spotted a question about the timeline, about the Erasmus student card. So I don't know if you have some specific timeline to share with the colleagues.
Unfortunately, we don't have any more specific timeline as soon. Would encourage you to watch the website and subscribe to the newsletter. This is the other call to action. To be updated first when we do know. We hope to get this out as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks. Great to see that working on that. So I think there will be updates soon. Let's go to the next uploaded question. I think it's about the online learning agreements and learning agreements, I suppose, in general. So it's from Marte Osmundsen, and it's probably a comment as well. It is much faster for us to reject an online learning agreement than it is to find the contact test for a partner. I think this is also the discussion about contact details in the learning agreements. I don't know. There's also a suggestion from Andre about bringing back the previous feature of the online learning agreement, setting by default responsible person in the online learning agreement for all incoming students. So probably, I don't know, Paul, you have some comments on the comments?
I can only reiterate my previous reply, but I would also like to make clear that we need to make a distinction between what is possible via EWP. So EWP does describe how information needs to be exchanged and what information needs to be exchanged. However, there's of course also the local implementation, as it were. And the local implementation is something that EWP cannot control. That's the provider, that's the IT, either the third-party provider or the EWP dashboard as a provider or the in-house solution. And there, of course, you can create the system. It depends a little bit, of course, based on the user needs. Therefore, I think it's important, for example, as EWP dashboard user, if you have suggestions on how to improve that side of the equation, you can also go to the ESCI service desk. There's the possibility to add a ticket on suggestions for improvements. So if many colleagues kind of suggest the same issue, that might also be a way how it can be done. On the other side, third-party providers also, the colleagues probably have user groups in their country, or they can even use the EWP user groups to discuss how certain functionalities should look like in the local implementation. But this is not in scope of what EWP can do or can kind of impose how the local implementation should look like. It's up to the users to try to influence via the available channels. And of course, the more users that have the same demands, the more likely it is that it will become part of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Paul, about replying to these comments as well. So I think it's time now probably to conclude this webinar. I think it was great seeing you all here. Keep your questions. I see that there are 55 questions unanswered, unfortunately, in the Q&A section. So join us on the 16th of April for the town hall meeting, where you can live ask all these questions and get the answers. It was great seeing you once again here. And keep in touch. You have all the resources that you need. You see that there is a great team, a big team supporting all this initiative, of course, under the auspices and the leadership of the European Commission. So we will keep in touch. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again in the town hall meeting and the next edition of the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar. Have a great day to all. Bye.